Darin, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, brother. Super stoked to be here. Good to see you again.
It's great to see you too. And I know one of the things that you're incredibly excited about right now is talking about your latest book, Fatal Conveniences. And I know you've been talking about this stuff for the last couple of years. And I think to start, I'm somebody who's like pretty unaware of the impact of a lot of this stuff. What would you say is like one of the products or things I might be using on a daily basis that I might be overlooking as far as the impact it can have on my health long term?
Oh man, just throw a dart and hit it. But I mean, the one thing that's obvious that we all run around with is our cell phones, right? So we're all using the cell phones. They're literally connected to us all the time. The other thing is a t-shirt, your deodorant, your shampoo, your conditioner, um, your underwear, your cleaning products, your toothpaste, your dental floss, uh, like it just cologne if you're using cologne, like it's all of it. So, I know that this is it can be certainly overwhelming for people kind of hearing some of the stuff for the first time, but what I really want to do, and even with you, is like just flip on that kind of place that we were born into this stuff and we didn't think about it because it was part of our life straight away, right? And that's that's the thing that's kind of the most alarming to this stuff, that many of these things, most of these things that we're using on a day-to-day basis have inherently some flaws to them, and some exposures. So personal care, just items, um, lotions, moisturizers. Um, so yeah, we can unpack any one of those, but I would say that it's largely invisible, and part of writing the book was to bring into light this stuff so that we can change it. So like, why do it at all? Why bring this up? Because there we're constantly being exposed to this stuff, and this stuff meaning a concoction of several chemicals that are undermining the very thing that are dictating, optimizing, or undermining the optimizing of our own health. And so all of this stuff classifies as acutely. No, it's not hurting, it's not killing you acutely, right? Your tap water, when you drink it once, twice throughout that week, it's not killing you, because we've largely solved those problems of diphtheria and typhoid and dysentery. However, there is a fatal flaw to some of this stuff that's allowing us to be exposed to persistent body burden of this stuff. So if you think of, you know, the cell phone, you're persistently using it. If you think of, without cleaning your water, filtering your water effectively, you're persistently being exposed to endocrine disruptors, probable carcinogens with PFAS being in most of the water communities around the US. Herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, pharmaceuticals, BPA, BPH, all of this stuff. So really, it's it's reassessing the modern world and going, okay, how is it that these harmful chemicals, that is not me making this up, it's the thousands of research articles that and papers and studies that have been looking at this stuff, but the regulation bodies of our world haven't done a very good job, and has allowed for the persistent exposure of some of the stuff. So it's impossible for me to say one at this point, but these are things that we need to reassess. I mean, so if I were to ask you, if I were to flip this around and say, Doug, use your cell phone, right? Use it every day, right? You carry it around with you, you use it with you, you travel with it. How do you use it? And how are you using it? And then what is the inherent, have you thought about any risk? Do you take any measures whatsoever to minimize exposure? And also, does it feel like deeply in there that it's probably not a great thing to put up to your head?
I guess personally, I haven't thought about the risk as far as like EMF goes. I've certainly thought about it with like screen time and just staring at it for hours and hours and scrolling and being on it, and that taking away from my ability to do other things. I mean, when I've heard the EMF stuff, I for the longest time I've taken it with a grain of salt because I just didn't know like what to believe. I was like, is this just the latest thing that people are fear mongering about, or is there really merit to it? So um obviously I trust you. So if you could just unpack like a little bit about like why carrying your cell phone in your pocket, why being exposed to it for a long period of time can be problematic for our health, other than the obvious screen time reasons.
Yeah, and I mean, you bring up a great point. Obviously, the dopamine hits and the screen time and staring at an electronic device and blue light and everything, that's its own fatal conveniences, right? That's its own problems. But looking at electromagnetic fields, yeah, it can get wonky. And there is people that want to take information and create a lot of fear around it. My intention with all this stuff is not create fear, is to create awareness so that you have more choices than you previously knew about. So in terms of the research around electromagnetic fields, not to open it up too much, but I spend a huge amount of time. It's a whole chapter in my book that I spent like probably a good 6 months diving into, and with about, on average, about 20 researchers helping me out, sifting through a bunch of stuff. I once I kind of started with, I kept pulling the string, and I started kind of looking at the history of electrification, because it's not just, I'm not trying to just demonize the cell phone. It definitely has its own issues, but there's also issues around frequency and electromagnetic fields and non-ionizing radiation. So if you look at like the spectrum of frequency, you definitely get non-polarized energy from the sun. What does that mean? It's not polarized, and polarized is almost like, think of it in terms of a laser. If you were to take the sun and create a laser out of it, it would burn through you and kill. And like, you take a magnifying glass and you can zero in the intensity of the non-polarized energy and kind of make it polarized, and you can start a fire, right? So nature has non-polarized energy all around us, beneficial, and also if you hang out in it too long, it can cause issue. So you have to use common sense around that. The reason I say that is, and then you also have radiation. All of it's a form of radiation. Uh, and also radiation from the full spectrum of ripping DNA apart, clearly uranium and Chernobyl and X-rays and things like that. We know that that's why we have lead shields when we're getting X-rayed and everything else, that it stops that DNA carcinogenic activity. But now we're finding non-polarized, non-ionizing radiation, even extremely low ionizing radiation. The issue is that it's persistent. It's always. And so we're finding that in some of the research over time, it's starting to create damage. Even they're starting to show epidemiologic damage. So exposure over time also can start to alter DNA patterns, similar to exposure of fast food over time. You start turning on genes, you start creating disease states. Think of it in terms of that. So when you're talking about the cell phone, these are polarized, non-ionizing radiation devices. It's sending signal, right? It's thermal. You also have thermal heat. And here's the funny thing. This is a Pandora's box, but I'll just give the highlights. That in terms of this device, it's constantly sending these signals, right? It's constantly working really hard. When you have low signal, it's working really, really hard, and your EMF goes up because it's working to create a signal. And so some of the research shows that with persistent exposure and proximity exposure, so the closer the device is to you, so think about receiving a call and putting this device that's receiving electromagnetic radiation, it's in the microwave scale of radiation, that you're then receiving a signal of polarized radiation to your phone, which is then into your body. And adults have a stronger immune system. Kids, you put a cell phone up to the head, there's imaging studies that the radiation actually penetrates all the way through the skull, right? So some of the so the bottom line is it's invisible stress pollution. Think of it in terms of that. So if you were in a room and someone was smoking, you would see them smoking, you would smell the cigarette smoke, and you could see it. And even still, for 40 years, the tobacco industry kicked that can down the road and said, hey, there's no evidence. It's safe. Yes, it needs more studies, but you're fine. So for 40 years, they were trying to convince us that cigarettes were fine, right? Well, there's a bit of a similar thing going on in the telecommunication, but the bottom line is it's stress, and some of the studies are showing similar to endocrine disruption, similar to almost the exposure to low-level chemicals, which I get into the book, is that exposure to this is opening up the blood-brain barrier to allow proteins that aren't supposed to be in the brain open up into the brain, right? So now you have proteins causing a cascade of effects of inflammatory responses and stress responses in the brain. That should already scare you. So holding this electromagnetic receiver and transistor next to your phone is potentially opening up the blood-brain barrier with proximity and usage and time. Then it's also showing that the stress response is showing free radical activity. So the free radical oxygen species that, we talk about antioxidants, get your antioxidants, because naturally we produce free radicals just by way of metabolism, but we also can increase them by the kind of foods we eat and trans fats and ultra processed food. Well, it turns out that this polarized radiation that we are swimming in, it's not just the cell phone, it's your laptop, it's your Wi-Fi router, smart devices, it's gaming devices. We're putting this invisible pollution around. It's increasing stress response, immune system response, and these free radical damage. And it's also, dude, this is where it gets weird. It's also lowering testosterone. So having a cell phone in your pocket is a really bad idea. Having a cell phone in the sports bra of a woman exercising is a really bad idea because they're showing long term, it's very proximal to the body and it's constant and there for a long period of time. So these things are, and it's also showing endocrine disruption. So it's showing hormonal changes in men and women by this thing that we use all the time. So what do we do about it? I'm not going to just leave people. So don't put a cell phone up to your head. Don't don't take a call and put it up to your head. Just a bad idea. Take it, go into a quiet room in your office or whatever, and take it on the speakerphone and keep the phone away from you. Plug back in. Use headphones. Better yet, use AirPod phones that have air tubes that don't allow any minute amount of electromagnetic fields to go to your brain at all, even through the cords. So these things shut your Wi-Fi routers off at night. This is stress. Think of it in terms of stress and pollution. So we are sprinting in electromagnetic pollution all over the place. I don't want to smartify any of my appliances. I don't want to buy any of that stuff. I want to plug back in. Things work better anyway. Um, and I want to minimize my exposure to cell phone use. And when it's on my body, I want to turn it on at the least, turn it on airplane mode.
So now that you've really scared me, because everything you just said not to do, I do all day, every day. And for the last X amount of time that I've had a phone, for the most part, um, I'm definitely going to implement some of the stuff that you said. I encourage the audience to do so as well. Is there anything else you would recommend doing other than what you just described with shutting off the Wi-Fi and plugging into headphones? Not care, like, where would you put your phone, for instance, like where would you put your phone, like if you are like working out in a gym, or if you are just like walking around like it in a public setting, like where do you keep your phone?
Well, turn it on airplane mode and put it in your pocket. And if you have to hold it, don't put it in your pocket and hold it if you're expecting a call, right? Don't put it up to your head. When you get that call, don't put it up to your head. Use it on speakerphone or plug your earpieces back in. And and again, so like Wi-Fi routers, all of that stuff, at least turn it off at night. You're not using anything, turn it off. You definitely want to minimize the electromagnetic fields while you sleep. And that's a really, really good idea. So, and there's a lot of great things that you can do. You can Ethernet cable and plug back in. If you have an office, that's where you're doing your work. It's really easy. Turn off the Wi-Fi router, plug it back in. There's a great company here in the US called Tech Wellness. They've got all these device. You can actually plug your cell phone back in. So if you're at home and you can actually turn on airplane mode, plug your phone back in, and then you minimize all of that stuff. I put for places that I haven't been able to shut down Wi-Fi altogether and plug back in, you can put a Faraday cage around your Wi-Fi. That's legit science, right? You can minimize it, depolarizes some of that radiation. There's great devices that I'm diving into the science on. Is another much bigger conversation, but there's other safe devices that you can minimize the polarized energy in your space. There's a great company called WaveGuard. They've got up to 25 studies that are showing minimizing your exposure and helping your biological system adapt to some of this pollution. So there's a lot of things you can do, but the easiest thing is, man, just don't put it up to your damn head, right? Try not to put it in your body, on your body. Even the fine print. of these phones saying it should be no closer than 9 inches to your head. And who's taking a call with their phone 9 inches away from the head? Nobody, right? So it's all these little loopholes. But anyway, electromagnetic fields, one chapter in my book. It's important for us to know because it's a really big thing, and they're putting 40,000 satellites surrounding our planet, blasting us with 5G. And I never got a vote in that, and we never got a vote in that. Most people don't know that that's what's happening, all under the guise of innovation. And it seems to be a perfect fatal convenience because we are under a consistent, continuous amount of stress under our bodies are absolutely showing huge amounts of stress. Animal studies, huge amounts of stress. The bottom line is we need more studies, and they need to prove that these things are safe, not using 20-year-old research that the FCC is using as safety standards for today's technology. That's what's going on. And that's insane to me.
And so moving on to something else that people use every single day, no matter what, I would say is water. You touched on the dangers of just traditional tap water earlier. Talk a bit about like, bad, better, good as far as the types of water that most people typically drink, and then what are a few things that people can do to improve the quality of their water?
Well, we know without a doubt that chemicals are in our water, and to varying degrees, right? There was a study done on about 2,800 different communities around the U.S., and that's approximating about 200 million people. All of them showed dangerous levels of toxins, right? So we can't see it, we can't technically smell it, we don't know that it's there by just looking at it, and we assume that this is safe. So one of our biggest exposures is this chemical classification of compounds called PFAS, and this is per and perfluoroalkyl substances. This is a derivative of the Teflon group in classification. There's about 9,000 different classifications of PFAS. And this is used all over the place. It's used in your clothing. And the reason I say this, how it's in the water, is because whatever we do in industry ends up in the water, ends up in the soil, ends up in the air. And then the bad part of circular economy, it comes back to get you again. So we think that there is an away button, that these things are away and they don't affect us. The truth is that's not true. So these PFAS chemicals, from your anti-wrinkle t-shirt to your slippery takeaway cartons and fast food, to women's makeup, mascara, beauty products that don't wipe off, all of that is forms of PFAS that show up in all kinds of different packaging and plastics. Then you have parabens and plasticizers that are now in the soil. You got pesticides, herbicides, larvicides, insecticides, pharmaceutical drugs. So here's what we do. There is virtually very little purely clean water. If you have a stream, an aquifer, a primary source of primordial water that you can test, that is the gold standard. Test it. And if you have it, drink that water. That's living water, right? But most of us don't have access to that. So what do? Very simple. Use reverse osmosis machine that can cost, $200. So now you run your drinking water through a membrane that doesn't allow for those chemicals to go with it. You can use distillation. that evaporates and recondenses, doesn't allow for those chemicals and toxins and heavy metals to go through. And then you need to remineralize it again. You can use pink Himalayan crystal salt. You have to, you know, there's microplastics potentially in some of the less great companies out there. Um, but for the most part, remineralize. And then now you have clean water. Get yourself a glass bottle. And now you've eliminated plastic exposure of using plastic jugs for water. On average, people are being exposed to 200,000 microplastics every year. And what does that mean? Microplastic is basically a hair length and less of plastic that we're consuming, most of which is coming from using plastic water bottles. Not to mention the squishiness of a plastic that allows it to be molded comes from phthalates, which are plasticizers. Other resins could be BPA, BPH, PBCBs, like these kind of things. All of that stuff, how they create things, is not only exposing you to consuming it, it also, by throwing it away or how it was created, is infecting the environmental side of things, of our waterways and everything else. And then that comes back, and of course, it's not being filtered. So that's how it reinfects us, right? So again, I'm not saying this to fearmonger. I'm saying this as taking a reality snapshot of what the hell we're being exposed to. This is not acceptable. This is great innovation that has a negative side effect. That over time, if you're not filtering, and listen, these Brita filters that just have maybe a tiny bit of a charcoal filter that's good for some chemicals, it's good for some heavy metals, that's not enough. It's not enough. It's something, but it's not enough. So invest in a good RO system, on the counter unit, under the counter unit, and then I would, a filter on your showers and everything. The gold standard is filter all your water coming into your house. These are more expensive. These can be 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. These can get, but also you're investing into health, right? And now you have clean water source that you can give to your pets, your kids. You're washing in it, you're bathing in it, we have to look at this stuff, and this is our big organ, and we're opening our mouth to this exposure. So this is a number one. I look at all these fatal conveniences, Doug, as go from the inside out. Start with the things that you're doing first, of opening your mouth, and the water is in beverages and food. These are the things to absolutely get aggressive at lowering your exposure to toxins.
And you hear a lot about like the dosage makes the poison for certain chemicals. You see that a lot online when people will come out and say a certain thing is harmful, and then they'll show a study, or they'll show something where they're like, well, they gave some like rat or animal like 1,000 times what a human would actually like ingest in a day. In your research and all of this, would you like you could confirm that the dosage of these chemicals that you're talking about that are in these products, these water products, and in our water are enough to actually have cause damage to human long-term health?
Yeah, not only that, in all these personal care products and sunscreens and all of this stuff, the thing that some of these safety standards do is they set these standards, but in actuality, the human use and exposure is often exponentially greater than the quote unquote safety standards that even people put in place. And there's great there's great. I interviewed one Dr. Shana Shama has a book called Countdown, getting deep into this. Other researchers showing these epidemiological research. Also, another great book, Dr. Leo Tersande, who's a friend, all this stuff. So what they found, especially Dr. Tersande, what he found was because of the endocrine system it's already moving and creating and changing based on minute shifts in the body, just naturally, right? Small amount of thyroid, small amount of the endocrine system needing to change, testosterone, estrogen, uh, all of these things. So when you introduce a foreign chemical estrogen binding compound, it's toxic to the body. So what they're finding is it's not necessarily high amounts of it. It's small amounts, continuous, added up over time every day, that's causing massive damage. So the thing about this stuff is that some of these things have half-lives and they come in and out of the body, but the problem is they're being exposed all the time. And then you have also forever chemicals, and these forever chemicals, like the PFAS, these stay in the body, these stay in the environment, and these are extremely dangerous. And this is where the policies and procedures really have to come up to standards. So there was a sunscreen study where they put safety studies. I think it was around a chemical called oxybenzene, and they said, "Hey, man, we put safety studies. You use it like this, and then it's fine. It's not that much exposure." But when they did the study, the actual use and reapplication that people actually did was 10 times the amount of that chemical was being used. And so the real use versus some of the safety is absolutely lopsided. And then the small amount of exposure added up over consistently, because like you wake up, you take the same shower, you use the same deodorant, you use the same body wash and shampoo and conditioner and fragrances and lotions and makeup and mascara and the same laundry detergent you used, that has the chemicals, that has the fragrances, that you just now put on your body, and then what the clothing is made of. Most of it is petroleum based, formaldehydes. like
Hmm.
Unfortunately, this sounds like a horror show, and it actually is. The fact that we are here, Doug, the fact that this actually is happening, for me, is a twilight zone. It literally is. I don't understand how we got here and how the regulatory bodies were supposed to have our back. The FDA, the FCC, the EPA, the USDA, you name it, the acronyms, the government agencies. Uh, Unfortunately, what happens is they put this stuff out there, and then if it causes harm, or there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that comes after it's out on the market, then they do something. Then they enact some sort of badge of courage, where they did that with PFAS. They did that. They enacted the what was it called? It was called the toxic standard control policy or something, or act, around PFAS, to go, okay, now we've had a meeting, the government enacts an agency to regulate PFAS. They're like, wait a minute, but that was on the FDA's desk a long time ago. Why was that proven safe first? So it's actually the opposite. There's 60 to 80,000 chemicals. I say this stat all the time because it's so unbelievable. Every year, man makes over 60,000 chemicals, throws them out into our environment, many of which, most of which, are not studied. There's about 1,000 to 1,500 that are studied for just their interaction in some sort of relationship to us or the environment, but then the rest aren't. And then none of them are tested as they interact. So when you take your shampoo and then your body wash and your conditioner and your lotion, no interaction of the phthalates and the parabens and the EDCs. None of them are tested as they interact with one another. So it's an absolute utter show when it comes to regulating any of this stuff. We are at the mercy of this chemical soup. So, and let me just say this, Doug. Why the hell did I write this book? Well, it happened because my dad suffered. He was he was a high achiever. He was an academic. He was a professor. And in the 90s, my dad was suffering neurological problems by being chemically exposed to normal levels of a shirt coming off of him, the perfume from a cologne, the fragrance in a normal shampoo, uh, formaldehyde in his couch, um, off gassing from paint, you name it. My dad had to retire early, a forced retirement, a disability that he had because of chemical sensitivity. So, in order to be around my dad in the 90s, when I would come back from college, I had to detoxify myself and use the products that he would send me. And then it quickly became, oh, he's not crazy because I thought he was. It's not in his head because I thought it was. It's real. And in the last 30 years, running alongside my life was constantly looking at this stuff. And then, of course, doing superfoods and formulations in the supplement world, I was running up against this and other FDA loopholes going, why are you guys allowing flow agents that are dangerous under the natural flavor constitution in the FDA? And like, so you see all this stuff and you're like, this is so cut to in my life. I wrote Super Life. I want people to eat the best food ever, live the best life, drink healthy water, have obviously include as much healthy, vibrant food and fruit and grains and nuts and seeds as possible. But then there's this invisible, very large elephant in the room of our life. And our modern day life is just because you can't feel it cognitively or physically doesn't mean that you're not suffering as a result of this stuff, because it's leading to metabolic issues, it's leading to cancers, it's leading to dysbiosis, it's leading to lowering of your immune system, a whole cascade of problems. And also the other problem is you can't acutely blame it. So it's not this proverbial chemical gun that's killing you instantly. It's over time and overexposure. So all I want is, I'm not a fan of some of these regulatory bodies. They're not moving at speeds they shouldn't have allowed some of these chemicals to be in there. The truth is that you and I, and your listeners need to be aware of this stuff. And I'm massively optimistic because I'm not saying get rid of your stuff. I'm just saying switch it. Switch it to things that are healthier for you and healthier for the planet, and lights will turn on. You will feel better as you integrate more and more of these things. I guarantee it. Over time, when you detoxify yourself from these products that ultimately don't care about you, and you choose better products, you create DIYs, you align yourself. By the way, my book has a third of it all solutions. This isn't just about hitting the drum and being, a bummer. This is about, no, we have to face it so that you can change it. And then we have a bunch of changes that are better for you and the world and your family. So that's where it's all coming from, man.
I love that, man. I love your mission and your inspiration that you've found to create this book from your own experiences, from what you saw your father go through, and just how I love how passionate you are about trying to continue to help people transform their health. As we kind of come to the end of our chat, I would love to help the listeners become more optimistic about like the beauty products. We talked about some solutions for water. We talked about some of the stuff we can do for cell phones and EMF. I mean, I would take a guess that a lot of people are still using these traditional beauty products that you would see in the stores. What are some, if somebody's looking at a label, what are some chemicals that they should definitely stay away from if they see it on a label? And what are a few like small tweaks they can make as far as the products that they buy, toothpaste, shampoo, deodorant, body wash, that can help them improve their health?
Yeah, it's a big one. But the things that you should, you know, parabens, ethyl parabens, like there's all kinds of classifications of parabens that's used as preservatives and stuff in many of the personal care. There's phthalates. Some of the fragrances you'll never know because you can be hundreds of loopholes of IP. I will say this, if a company is not aggressively telling you how great their ingredients are from a clean perspective, the chances are it's probably manipulating you on your insecurity. It won't wipe off. Your mascara won't wipe off. Well, how is it doing that? It's using chemicals to do that. So um, throw away the toothpaste that has fluoride in it. That has been shown to cause neurological issues. It's another reason to filter your water. Get rid of that fluoride that comes from the derivative waste product of the aluminum industry and the um, pesticide industry. That's where the fluoride's coming from, by the way. So get rid of those things. There's great I lay out tons of products in the solution base, but like for example, there's one cool company in your bathroom with not only sustainable packaging, but like you can get rid of a toothpaste tube and never have to try to squeeze it again. And there's a company called Bite toothpaste. You throw in a little bite down, you chew it up, and then you just brush normally. No toxic ingredients. And then they also have refillable packaging that send you. They have a clean deodorant with no aluminums and dangerous chemicals. Like that's just one example of some extraordinary. There's a deodorant company called Wild. That's cool. And toxic free. There's a lot of incredible companies. A great skin company that's not trying to basically tell you your skin's broken, but by giving it nutrition. A pharmacist I have known for 25 years, Ben Fuchs, called Truth Treatments, which is giving you nutrition for the skin and allowing your skin to come alive with true botanical wisdom. Like, so there's incredible companies doing amazing things, especially in the personal care space. So the beauty thing is that, yes, maybe you pay a little more, but some of these things last a lot longer. And you're also getting a maximization of some of these botanicals that are better for you and they're not chemicalized. So so I'm optimistic because the more we vote with our hard-earned money with companies that are doing good for you by their ethos and by the way they create their product and by the way they ship the product to you, then we create a movement because we always have the numbers on our side. When we continue to do that, then the industry follows us, then the government follows us. So we always have the power.
And I think that's a great place for us to end this. So, Darin, I wanted to thank you so much for coming on and spilling your heart out on the podcast with your mission to help people make better choices when it comes to certain aspects of their health, what they're drinking, how they're using their phone, the products they're wearing, what they're surrounding themselves with in their house. If people want to connect with you, if they want to buy the book, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, so All Play comes out May 16th. I don't know whenever this is launching, but the darinolien.com's got Fatal Convenience book, all places you buy books, basically. Uh, choose your best one. Darinolien.com's got a bunch of stuff. Got my newsletter on there. I got nice little secrets that I give out on my newsletter as well. So yeah, man, it's out and it's ready and it's a resource. Think of it as a resource book because you can literally open it up to any page, you can learn something, and then there's always a solution for it. You don't have to be overwhelmed. We're always a journey in progress. Our life is like that. We are perfectly imperfect. We become aware and then we can take action. We have knowledge and then we can apply. That's what this is. So use this book as a resource to then apply to yourself, your children, your environment, and pass it on to other people so that they can have the best life ever.
Amazing. I love that. And I love that you've created this incredible resource for people to be able to use. And I will make sure to include the links I will be sure to include the link for people to be able to buy your book, as well as the links to be able to connect with you in the show notes. And for those listening, what I invite you to do is share a takeaway. We covered so much and went so deep. Darin talked about the dangers of excessive cell phone use, as well as some ways and some solutions that you can actually improve the way you use your phone. We talked about the same thing with water, the dangers of using traditional tap water, as well as some great alternatives and solutions to make your water quality better. And then lastly, we dove deep. And lastly, we talked about beauty products and the dangers of using certain beauty products and how you can make certain choices and how you can make better choices with the products that you buy. So whatever the takeaway was, tag Darin, tag myself, because we'd love to hear your feedback. And we once again thank you for listening to this episode of The Adversity Advantage. I'm your host, Doug Bopst, and we'll see you next time.